So we're a brand new centre. We only formally launched in this January. Now, there were seeds that came across the university that came together to create the centre. So there was the HIST cluster, there were elements of REP in the School of Law, and there was momentum around the university for about 10 years before the centre was formally launched. We're slightly different to other research centres in that we are externally funded. So we have all our funding comes from the HEA, and that makes us different and gets over some of the hurdles I was hearing here earlier. We do have full-time administrative assistants. We have Denya, who's sitting there in pink, colour-coded with Research Week. I am a full-time director. I don't have other responsibilities. But I can honestly would say that the centre, because of the research area, couldn't be done without a full-time director. The need for implementation research in Ireland at the moment far outstrips the resources that we have, and we'll get onto some of that in a moment. So we work in a difficult space in that the most common response that I get to implementation research is, well, what is that? And the second most common response I get is, well, it doesn't apply to me, I don't do that, so it's not my area. And I actually completely disagree with that for most people. But let's start with, what is implementation research? So the formal definition of it is the scientific study of methods to promote the systematic uptake of research findings into routine practice, and hence to improve quality and effectiveness. My definition is it is the science of how we do things, not what we do. So it's all about the how. So just to give you a brief history, because implementation science could be considered a newer science, and some people would argue it's an older science, but I'd say that it's actually both. The first documented evidence that we have of the concepts of implementation research go back to 1943 and a study in Iowa on seed, core, and diffusion. The fundamentals of diffusion theory are a central tenet to implementation research. So two concepts came out of that study that we still rely on heavily today. And when I say them, you're going to think, oh yeah, that's very straightforward. Of course it is. But it was actually the first evidence underpinning the need for this. So individuals are the locus of decision making, and adoption is a key dependent variable in any study. So to move forward in time, right up until the 1960s, it was widely assumed that if research was made available, implementation of best practice would automatically happen. So the academics sitting there going, I've done a study, I have published it, and now the world is going to change. It obviously doesn't work like that, but it was assumed that if practitioners out in the professionals had read a study, then they would change their practice. But it doesn't work like that because individuals are time poor. There are systems that they have to work within. So from the 1970s to up to now, we had 50 years of evolution and expansion of implementation science. And you'd see sometimes I use implementation science and implementation research. They're slightly different. Implementation research is the overarching term. We developed about 170 theories, models, and frameworks. And we moved from that top-down approach to implementation into a multifaceted, multidisciplinary approach, which involved practitioners. So it changed from the higher-ups, the policymakers, the academics saying, let's do it this way, to, no, let's come down and work with the people on the ground and build it back up from there. But all of that underpinned by scientific methodologies. In the early 2000s, we saw the establishment of organizations and networks in implementation research across the world. It's just like a bomb went off and they started exploding up and appearing everywhere. 2021 was called the coming of age of implementation science. And in 2025, we had the launch of CIRcUL. We are the first, definitely in Ireland, probably in the world, academically led multidisciplinary research centre for implementation research. And those two elements are really important. There are lots of centres around the place. We have the Centre for Effective Services in Ireland. they do implementation work, but they don't do the academic side of it. They don't push at the methodologies. They don't publish the academic papers that underpin the work. They just use what's out there to do the work. And the multidisciplinary side of it is crucially important. It could be argued that implementation science started in health. Probably didn't, as we saw the seed corn diffusion is farming, agricultural, but it definitely did grow up in the health space. So we've moved it out of that. We work anywhere between implementation of policy and human services. We work in all the in-between space. So, what is implementation research? Now, I've borrowed this from a good friend of mine, Jeff Kearns, who is the director of the Centre for Implementation in Arkansas, which is academically led but is health-focused. So the intervention, practice, or innovation is the thing. And we use that term in implementation research all the time. Anyone coming from an effectiveness research background, you'll recognize this. Effectiveness research is, it looks at whether the thing works. We've done this thing, does it work? What is our outcome of interest, does it work? That's what that's evaluating. Implementation research looks at how people or places do the thing. Implementation strategies are the activities we undertake to help people or places do the thing. And implementation outcomes are how much or how well people have done the thing. So it's all that middle piece that often gets ignored. So I want to work you through a very, very simple problem to overcome this answer that I usually get when I'm talking about implementation science is, well, it doesn't apply, or I don't do that. So this is a really, really simple problem that everybody should have in their own lives. Outcome of interest is a clean house. Yeah, we all want a clean house. Maybe not my husband, but I certainly do. The intervention, right, this is my planned intervention. All household members contribute and take responsibility for a chore. It's an evidence-based intervention. The resources required, so we've sat down and went, okay, what are the resources required to implement this? Well, we need time and cleaning products. Fabulous. Now, let's move all of this into an implementation space. 5 key concepts that we are very concerned with are context, readiness, feasibility, sustainability, and fidelity. So context is about where is this going to be done. So implementing this intervention in my house versus your house, the context is going to be different. And the same applies everywhere. We could take a fabulous program from Scotland that worked really well. We're looking at one recently with antisocial behaviour, worked fabulously there. Can we implement it here in Limerick? Not to hope, the context is entirely different. So we look at context and we do all the evidence-based and the scoping of the context. And then we move into readiness. Readiness is the place, are the people ready for this change? Feasibility is, how hard is it going to be to implement? Sustainability is about, once the researchers have gone in, or the key stakeholder has gone in and implemented something, and they leave, is it going to be sustainable by the people on the ground after the fact? And fidelity is similar, but it's, will the intervention still be the same thing in a year's time? So let's look at the context now for this outcome of interest of a clean house and an intervention of all household members contributing. This is my household. Now, I'm very biased and they're fabulously cute, but what it does mean in terms of context is my workforce are immature, unskilled, and unmotivated. So the resources that are required to implement this really simple evidence-based intervention are actually entirely different. Yes, I need time and cleaning products, but I also need supervision, coordination, training, incentives, team meetings, and lots and lots of praise, probably bribery. In terms of feasibility, yes, it is feasible, but the input that is required now, given the context, is much, much bigger than it would be in a different household. In terms of readiness, nope, not at all. And in terms of sustainability and fidelity post-intervention, not at all. The minute I walk out the door, none of this would be done. So let's then, still staying with this idea of it's a research project or it's a practical thing we want to implement, we still have the same outcome of interest. of a clean house. But now that we've parsed that through the implementation theories, models, and frameworks, we actually need to come up with realistic expectations of what can be done. So the implementation plan is now a 5-year implementation plan. And the intervention is now training, culture shift, and years for gaining maturity. We'll still get a clean house, but it won't be this weekend, it'll be in 5 years' time. And at that point, it'll be feasible and sustainable into the future. So I know I've picked a very, very basic thing here. But this, I hope, demonstrates how you could take these theories, models, and frameworks and apply them to nearly all research projects. So common research questions that implementation research answers are things like, what factors influence the adoption of an intervention? How do we adapt interventions to fit with local contexts? What strategies promote long-term sustainability? How do we measure the effectiveness of implementation strategies? And what role do stakeholders play in the implementation process? So they're the kind of the big ones, if I had to distill everything down into a few bullet points. There are many, many others. So that brings me to the centre. So our overarching aim, our objective, is to encourage uptake of evidence-informed policy and programmes in areas identified as problematic by government departments, state agencies, and voluntary sector parties. So I said at the beginning that we work everywhere between the policy and the human services. We are topic agnostic, meaning we'll take on any project within any discipline, and we bring the implementation science, methods, theories, and frameworks and expertise to that. Our strategic aims are to develop implementation research capability and support the use of implementation methodologies. This is really important. There is an enormous gap in Ireland and internationally between the level of implementation science expertise, and by that I mean like the number of people with them, and the need for implementation science application. Enormous need. We aim to be a trusted advisor with expertise in delivering strategies to support implementation. So we're building a brand, and quite successfully, actually, we're building a brand with Limerick City and County Council, with the Department of the Taoiseach, with the Department of Children, and with other few national agencies. We are a place to come to for those expertise. And we are working to build capacity in implementation science nationally and internationally through teaching and contributions to the academic literature. So like I said, we have other organisations that work in this space, but they're not doing the academic publications. And it's hugely, hugely important for us to push at the boundaries of implementation science and move it forward. So the composition of the centre is that we have core staff. So we currently have 3 core staff. We have another one coming on board, and we have 2 PhD students just about to be advertised. So they're all core funded from the HEA grant. The next loop around us is our programme monitoring group and our advisory board. The programme monitoring group are about 15 people from, across the university who have been working within their own discipline but doing implementation research. And we have 3 of the 4 faculties represented at the moment, and I'm working hard for the 4th. We also have our advisory board, so these are national and international experts in implementation research. So for example, Jeff Curran, who I quoted earlier, he's on that. Then we have our outer membership. We currently have about 80 members, and they are full members who are UL, internal to UL, are affiliated with UL. Affiliate members then, so they would be people, practitioners, people situated in other universities, and student members. So how we work, we do 2 core pieces, research and capacity building. In terms of research, we have core research projects to deliver on under the HEA funding. And so we undertake those core projects, but we also partner with others to lend our expertise, and we partner with others to seek funding for other projects, or for joint projects. In terms of capacity building, we deliver training and provide mentorship for researchers and academics. So there's currently a course ongoing in mastery of implementation research. So this is for people who are well on their career trajectory. We'll be doing an introduction one starting in September. We're currently in the process of developing micro-credentials. So these are aimed out to the public for people working in the field, practitioners on the ground, to come in and get the micro-credentials. We support PhD students, either internally through funding them or through joining supervision teams to bring that implementation experience to the PhD. And as I said, we drive the field of implementation science forward by publishing reports and academic papers. We also host networking events and conferences. So what are we doing? We have 3 large-scale projects. All the detail of this is on our website. The 3 large-scale projects are, we are working with the Department of the Taoiseach to evaluate the local childhood poverty action plan pilots. That's fun. We're also working with Respond, who are an approved housing body, to capture what they call the Respond way. So this is the intangible things that they do to build communities, not just houses. And they want to scale that up. So there's the whole question of scalability. How do you scale the intangible? We are also working on virtual wards. So the pilots of virtual wards, which are happening in Limerick and Dublin, on the evaluation of the implementation. We have 6 wicked problems. These are small-scale things where we go into an area. Sorry, I should say a wicked problem is something that's difficult to define, and there's no right or wrong answer, just better or worse. So we go in somewhere really specific. So at the moment, we're in Newcastle West working on antisocial behaviour, and we're taking the people, the stakeholders on the ground there, through a programme so that they can come up with solutions to help. We're also working on street homelessness in Limerick City with the Mayor's Office. We have 3 methodological advancement projects, because as I said, it's really important to push at the methodologies. We've 1 knowledge translation project. Knowledge translation falls under the umbrella of implementation research. We have the capacity building that I mentioned. And we are working hard on developing learning resources. They're up on the website and they can be used then by others. In terms of opportunities, we have membership. Membership is open. We host networking events. All the training is available either online or by joining one of the courses. We can join you to input on implementation elements of your own research, either through consulting or through partnering. You can also get involved in any of the research projects that we are doing. And we are developing a student prize aimed at undergraduates and masters to encourage the knowledge of implementation science right into the beginning of people's careers. So just to finish with a thank you to our funders and partners, HEA, HSE, Respond, Mayor's Office, Department of the Taoiseach, and Max Breastfeeding, which is a UCC project. So thank you.